All right, so let's do this. So first question, kids and open source. That's a really interesting question because what you really want kids to understand about open source has nothing to do with open source, but more with the collaborative spirit of it. So I go around the country and talk to K through 12 classes, as we actually talked about last night. So technically your question is cheating. I thought I answered it over drinks. I was not that drunk. And I go around and I talk to them, and it's not important that they understand open source or software as much as collaboration, because we live in a society right now that's very competitive. It's not even co-opetition. It's like, you know, you have to be the best at this, and you didn't make varsity that, and you're not first chair this in the band. And the great thing about open source is everybody can participate. It's almost more of a philosophy, a way of doing things. Open source is not a type of software, and there's going to be other people who are going to say it is, and they're going to hate me for saying this. Open source is a state in the evolutionary life cycle of software. All things eventually end up in open source because people end of life them, and now end of lifing products into open source is a great way to go. If you look at software and you have code and it's got to be compiled and has a license that either gives you rights or takes it away and so on and so forth, and you look at open source, they start looking a lot identical. Now, don't get me wrong, but it's the community that makes the difference. And the thing to teach kids about open source and what they should learn is about that community. Now, we also had a debate last night about technology and how we teach that in schools. And we don't teach enough of that. We teach math and science, and we teach basic literacy and things like that. But technology is kind of different. It's not really a math or a science, because I would be failing now like I did in high school. It's a little bit more, it changes really fast, it's very adaptive. So what do kids need to be about open source? Community, collaboration, top two answers. How to build an open source policy in enterprise. I tried this once. It was interesting. A company, a very conservative company named BMC Software, hired me to come in and be the chief architect of open source and open innovation, and actually worked really well. And there's a catch here. How do you get them interested? You have to show them the money, right? And it can't be savings, because everybody does that with their budgets. They're like, but no, seriously, give me this. I'm going to save this much money. What I did at BMC was we built a community out of customers who built a bunch of software under stuff that we'd put out under the BSD so that they could do whatever they wanted with it. And then what I showed the company was, hey, just like they can take it and do pretty much anything they want, so can we. And we built a support program. Now, I don't want to skip ahead to the money question, but we'll come back on that. But how do you build it in the enterprise? One, do you need it? Okay? There's nothing wrong with proprietary software, you know? Disappointment. Open source guy says that. But open source software has a very big place in the world. It runs the world. Things like Apache still run dominant amount of web servers. These things are great, but there's nothing wrong with companies who have proprietary software. There are some cases in where that software proprietary actually arguably could be a better model for that, for what they're doing. More cooks in the kitchen isn't always a good thing. Your company, though, your enterprise is going to fear all of the FUD, right? You say, oh, well, then somebody's going to put something in, and another company's going to find out, and they're going to sue us, or Stallman's going to come after us, or whatever the case may be. And at the end of the day, some of that happens. I mean, most recently, right? How many of you are following the whole Oracle Android thing? Anybody? Right? So Larry Ellison was like, ta-da, I own Android. And he kind of does, he kind of doesn't. It'll be a big epic court battle. It'll probably set down a lot of the ground rules that may make your company even more worried about getting into open source. But at the end of the day, when you're in an enterprise, you're in a proprietary system model, right? And so if you want to get them sold on open source, explain this to them. Not all things have to be open source, ever. Draw a line in the sand. I mean, that's what I did at BMC. I said, great, you're a proprietary software company. You want to do some open source? But when you cross that line and you do it all the way. Don't use a GPL. Don't write your own license. I totally agree with Bob on that. I think that's great advice. Use a BSD. Use whatever you can to give it away as much as possible. Don't use a reciprocal license. Who cares if anybody gives back? You're a multi-billion-dollar company. Use a permissive license. Let them go and do whatever. So what I would say is explain to them the risk and explain to them how to mitigate the risk. And explain it to them in their terms. In the following, you don't have to open source everything. You can easily firewall it within the company. You can easily draw a line. But if you do open source, make sure you do it all the way. Because otherwise, it's not only disingenuous, it's just bad business, and you won't have any luck in really building a real community around that. BMC, I think, has now about 17,000 developers in theirs, which for enterprise systems management is pretty great, because how many of you love enterprise systems management, right? Everybody? How many of the kids here in school are looking at that as a career option? Anybody? None of you? Shocked. Shocked. All right, how to make money. That's easy. again, proprietary software, open source software, look at them and they look a lot alike. Where's the money made on proprietary software? Well, it's made in that initial fee that they charge you. But most of it in a lot of areas is made in the support and the maintenance of that, which, by the way, looks exactly like what the open source guys do to make money. So there's 3 ways to make money in open source. If you're a developer, you can build up your cred and get paid a lot more if you go to work at a company that's open source, positive company, because you're not just doing software. Your value is a lot greater because you're doing software and you're leading community and you're representative of the company, and they're getting kind of this package deal. If you're running a project, you're a project manager, you want to try to find a way to do an open source project and make money, let your customers build it for you. When we started at BMC, we basically opened root level access to all of the customers that wanted it on the servers we were using. We gave everybody all of the permissions. And sure, we had problems. You know, there were a couple things where somebody messed something up or whatever, but we're a system management company, right? We just boop, backed it up and no problem. By doing that, we let the customers lead us to where the money was. Customers will tell you what they want, how they want it built, how they want it delivered, and how to pay for it if you will shut up and listen. Always. Open source is a great way of involving those customers in that process, right? And the third way is you can use it to get into customers. Having an open source, using it as leverage, basically. Having a way to take your open source and get you exposed to customers who won't go and talk to you because they don't want to talk to a sales guy, who won't go in and put in the demo because you have to send a crew out to install it or whatever. Open source can be a great gateway drug for them to get them close enough to see the work you're doing. And if you do it in a community way and a free way, it's a great way to build a customer community around that. Oh, open source is a tool to maintain skills as a developer. How many of you developers in the room? How many of you contribute to open source projects? Just keep your hands up. Okay. I have never met you guys. So I have a whole, I hate to sound harsh on that like I am on everything else, but I always hear these stories. When I went to work for Benchmark Capital, and they had me come in to be a CTO of a company called Clusters. And the CEO said, "Glad you're here. We're going to open source it." Done. It's like, well, how's the software? It's good. Everything's fine. And when we get it out there, there are going to be hundreds of thousands of people who work on this, right? Because that's the illusion. The illusion is there's going to be all these people that work on it. And I would guarantee that with almost every project, with the exception of very few, if you go and you look at it, the amount of people who say they contribute, the amount of people who have actually committed anything that could be measured, value can be measured of that, are starkly different. So if you are an open source developer and you are actually contributing, you're not an expert. You're not maintaining your skills because you can build a Linux kernel. You're not maintaining your skills because you know how to compile or whatever. You're actually contributing. You're pushing that software forward. Your value in my book, I'll hire you like that. Your value goes way, way up. How do you maintain those skills? You maintain those skills by staying on the cutting edge and staying right on top of the projects that matter in your industry. If you're in a vertical industry, that you can pick a project that whatever. I don't want to harp on systems management, but take that. There's plenty of projects out there that are always trying to get going. Everything, right? Nagios has been going. It's one of the largest projects out there. Go call Ethan. Get together with him. See how you can help. Actually contribute something. Maintain your skills by doing the walk and not talking about it. Actually do the work, because every time that I interview a developer and they tell me they contribute, and I say, "That's great. What did you contribute to?" Show me the commit logs. They don't have them. Say, "Oh, well, I'm in the forums, and I'm on the mailing list. I talk a lot. I bitch a lot about the software." They don't actually do anything. All right? You need, if you're a developer and you want to maintain your skills, to actually write code. Because if you're a developer and you don't on that project, worthless to me as an employer. I don't want to hire you. Right? So maintain your skills by actually doing it. And if you can't find a project you can get on, start your own. It's a beautiful thing about open source. Right? Now, just like Bob said about licenses, I don't want to see everybody go out and create another cajillion licenses. I don't want to see another cajillion projects either. Because if we go to SourceForge, we see hundreds of thousands of projects. How many of them are active? Well, technically, a lot of them are active. But active to me is there's monthly, some changes on it. There's people talking about it. There's commit. There's progress. There's a roadmap. They're doing stuff. If you go through and use that as criteria, you can start eliminating a lot of those projects. So, I say that with a little bit of, take it with a grain of salt. Don't go start another open source project if there's already a good one you can join. You don't have to be the leader of it. You just have to participate in it and provide some value. How do I get involved on Saturday? Who asked that? Drinks. So how do you get involved in open source? Again, Bob made a really good point about you don't have to just have developers involved. I participate in a thing called a bar camp. Anybody done a bar camp here? Awesome. So I'm the Bar Camp Austin founder, and we grew it pretty big. Our last one, did 7 days of planning, had about 3,500 people. None of them were developers, and it was a fantastic event. How do you get involved? What are your skills, sir? You're what? What? I'm sorry. Can you just shout it loud? You're a developer? Okay. So, easy for you to get involved, right? I mean, find something to contribute to. The best way to contribute to an open source project, you want to find a way to do it. On Saturday, go pick a project that you use, that you love, and then go look at all of the bugs or the feature requests and things like that, and see which ones you can take off that list. Don't be afraid to just do testing. You don't have to come in and be a superstar coder. You know what I would love in all of my open source projects? Somebody who just came in and said, this is broken. That would be a tremendous help. Because I'd rather hear it from one guy as we were preparing to release than from 100,000 people after it shipped, right? So, easy to contribute. If you want projects to contribute to you, people ask me all the time, do you know any developers that do X? So just come see me afterwards. I can have you in a project by this afternoon. You won't like it. It's a lot of work. Also, don't tell him it doesn't pay. You have to work for free.